Okay, today we're going to be learning about space in two-dimensional art. Lesson 2 introduces space in two-dimensional art. Artists use perspective techniques to create the feeling of depth in a flat surface.
Have you ever noticed how things that are far away look smaller?
¿Alguna vez han notado que las cosas que están lejos parecen más pequeñas?
Okay, so today's lesson, the aesthetic perception, is you're going to be learning how to relate to different artists and how artists use perspective techniques to show and to create space in a two-dimensional work of art. Art criticism, you're going to learn how to evaluate your own work using the 4 steps of art criticism. The creative expression, if you'd like to, you can paint an outdoor scene or create an outdoor scene using perspective techniques to create illusion of depth. And for the art history and culture, you're going to demonstrate the knowledge of the lives and the works of 2 artists, Winslow Homer and William Adolphe Bergerot. So, look at these 2 realistic paintings on these pages. Even though both are two-dimensional works of art, these artists successfully use techniques to make some of the things look further away than others.
Let's take a close look at the 2 works of art.
Okay, before we do that, what can you tell about American and French culture in the late 1800s from looking at these realistic works of art? In addition to the visual clues, the titles might offer clues as well, and we'll take a look at that in just a minute. Seeing like an artist. When you're traveling home from school today, make sure you look around your surroundings. Compare the objects nearer to you to those further away from you. So let's look at these. Let's study both works of art, see how they're used. First, we're going to learn about Winslow Homer, and he's a very, very famous American artist, best known for his watercolor paintings. In his art career, began during the Civil War when he worked as a magazine illustrator. After spending a year in a fishing village on the coast of New England in 1881 and 1882, his focus changed. There he concentrated on the interaction of humans and nature, and he developed what would become his signature watercolor technique. And then let's look at Bergerot. He was born in La Rochelle, France. As a young boy, he worked to put himself through the École de Beaux-Arts school, which is like the big art school. He is noted for his use of color, space in his paintings, and space in his paintings. Themes that emerged from his most popular works of art were taken from classical mythology, the Bible, and his contemporary life. Contemporary life means what was going on in his everyday life at the time of the artwork. Okay, so let's look at how the space was used. Find an object that overlaps and covers part of another object. Okay, creating depth in each painting. Okay, so what's something that's in this painting that's overlapping and creates depth? Okay, just want you to take a look. We'll go over in just a minute. So, what is something that is overlapping? And remember, a piece of paper is 2D and it's flat. So as the artist created his artwork, he tried to make it appear that it's 3-dimensional and has depth. So in Homer's painting, Nooning, it's the name of this painting, the overlapping trees and the house create the illusion of depth. So you can see the house is in the background, so he's made that smaller. Also, this tree is in the foreground, so it's bigger. And then as he put trees further back to make it appear that it was further back, he would make them smaller, going from middle ground, foreground to background. And things, we know the things that are placed further up on the page and further back on the page. And the size of it, the smaller you make it, it gives the illusion that it is going into the painting and that's far away. And let's look at this one. This is the Nut Gatherers, and this is the same one. What is overlapping in this picture? Okay, let's take a look. Again, In Bergeron's painting, The Nut Gatherers, the girls are overlapped. And you can see that one girl is behind the other one. And so this one means she's in the front, she's in the back. And then if you look in the background, you see the trees are much smaller. And then you can also see something like this little pop of blue right here and this little area right here. So it makes it look like this is the larger area. And as you look further back into the painting, you can see that it's going from larger to smaller, and it's also higher up on the page. Find an object that appears larger in one place than the other appears smaller in another. I think we already talked about that. In nooning, the larger trunks on the trees seem closer. Nut gatherers, the leaves, there's also leaves on the ground that seem to be closer than the smaller trees. Okay. It's just different placement. Where do you see strong colors? Where do you see colors that are weaker? The stronger colors are going to be, let's see here, the boy in the house behind him seemed closer because of the bright colors used. Okay. And nut gatherers, the viewer's eyes go to the girls first because he used a lot of clear details to paint them. And the trees in the background and everything else, you can still see it has less detail because it's further away, just like in real life. So I would say the brighter colors are the ones that you see right up front. Find an object near the bottom of the painting and something near the top. Which of these objects seems closer? Obviously, the boy is at the front, so he seems larger than all the other things. Same thing with this girl. The girl in the front, if you look at, she's going to be slightly bigger than the girl in the middle and everything in the background. She's going to be the biggest thing. Okay, so yes. The boy is placed towards the bottom. Remember, anything that you put on the bottom is also considered closer. Things you put in the bottom are closer. Things you put higher on the paper is further away. But you just have to make sure if you put something on the top of the paper that you also make it smaller. Okay, gatherers, leaves. The bottom of the paintings are closer. Then there's the girl. So let's look at this. Space and two-dimensional art. This will help you understand this a little bit more. Perspective techniques are used to create a feeling of depth on a flat surface. For instance, if you have two stars here, we use a term that's called overlapping. When one object covers a part of the second object, the first one seems to be closer to the viewer. So the one that's in the front is going to be the closer, and the one in the behind that's in the back is smaller. Size. We talk about size. Larger objects seem to be closer to the viewer than the smaller objects. Okay, you think about a long time ago when the people of that time period thought when they were on the ocean and they would see the boats that sail away, the boats would sail away and up close, and then as they got smaller, it disappeared, and they thought that it fell off the earth because it got smaller and smaller. They didn't realize the further something goes, the smaller it gets and it disappears. Okay, and they didn't understand that. Placement also. Objects placed near the bottom of the page seem to be closer to the viewer than the objects placed higher up. So not only are you thinking about going from big to small, you're also thinking about where you're putting it on the paper. So anything that's in the background, you have to make smaller, and you also have to put at the top of your page.
How can you create depth in a two-dimensional piece of art?
All right, just told you. Space and two-dimensional art. Here we go. We talk about details. You see the two B's up here? When you talk about details, objects that are closer are going to be clear, has sharp edges, and many details seem to be closer to you and the viewer. And then things that are further away, you're not going to have a lot of detail. It's going to lack detail. It's going to have fuzzy outlines, and it's going to seem further away if you don't put as much detail to it. Also, you can use colors to show space in two-dimensional art. Brightly colored objects seem closer to the viewer, and objects that are pale, faded, and dull, sometimes, that can give the illusion that it's further away. Also, converging lines. Converging lines means two lines coming together, like this right here. So parallel lines, remember, two parallel lines are two lines that are opposite of each other, and they are not touching. But if you take parallel lines and they seem to move closer together, if you take it and you create a wedge shape, almost like a pyramid, and parallel lines seem to move towards the same point as they move further away. So you can see how the artist drew the horizontal line, the horizon, and then he went from one corner and drew it to a point right here, the other corner, and drew that to a point. And then, of course, if you put something on here, it looks like a road and it looks like it's getting smaller. And as you can see how they put the trees on here. The objects that are closer up are bigger, and as they get further, it gets smaller. Same thing with the telephone pole. They put one here, and they made sure to get smaller, 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 so it appears that everything is converging. That's the word, converging. All right, so what you can do, you don't have to do this, but if you were to go onto the Nearpod lesson, it may ask you to do something like this, and you'll have to go ahead and illustrate it. But it says to illustrate 6 perspective techniques. Use a pencil. What 6? Well, if you go back, these were the 6. Overlapping, size, placement. Whoopsie. Oversized, and then detailed, color, and converging lines. So what you did is you took a piece of paper and they just wrote it on there, and they illustrated the 6 different ways that they could show. So the first one was obviously overlapping. The second one was placement, detail, converging lines, and color. Can't see that. All right, so think about how the student used how they use this perspective techniques to paint an outdoor place. Okay, so you can see the fence is on a hill and it's much smaller than everything. Then you have a little girl here and she's ice skating, and there's a boy here and they're about the same size. And then you have the big trees here, and then you have a tree right here. And these all kind of look to be the bigger. What she could have done was taken this little girl and made the little girl a little bit bigger, and this person right here but a little bit bigger. And then they could have made, see how the people are the same size? She could have made these people a little bit smaller. She did do right with the fence in the background, made that smaller, but it would have been better if she made these people bigger, and then it went from, let's think, large, medium, small towards the background. But that's pretty good. So one of the things you could do if you wanted to is, if you have some supplies at home or if you want to try drawing it, how can you use perspective techniques to create the illusion of depth? Create a scene of your favorite outdoor place, including depth. So here's an example where someone was creating depth using a playground, and they're using the slide, and then they have a smaller tree in the background. It looks like there's a cityscape. But as you notice, here's the swing. The slide is on the bottom of the page, so that's the first thing and then the swing is in the middle section, and then there's some kind of other playground, but you notice that it's smaller. So making it smaller means that it's further away. Okay, so things that are biggest and closest are at the bottom, then you have the middle, and then you have things that are further away that are smaller. Okay, so you could create a scene if you wanted to. So if you were going to describe your artwork, if someone were to ask you, you would describe your artwork and describe your outdoor scene. You could analyze it. What perspective techniques did you use to create depth in your two-dimensional painting or artwork? Did you try to create everything that you could remember in that outdoor area? If you did, why did you choose to include some of these things and not others? And deciding, were you successful in creating the illusion of depth in your painting? Which perspective technique seems to be the most effective in creating depth? Okay, so you're going to need to go onto your Nearpod lesson and go ahead and complete that for the week. So it may ask you to do some of these activities using your digital device, your digital tools. Okay, so you are done for today. Make sure you go on there and complete it.
How would you explain the use of space in two-dimensional art?
Okay, just remember that whenever you create artwork, be prepared to always discuss it, talk about it, and write about it.
¿Cómo explicarían el uso del espacio en el arte bidimensional?
Awesome. So we're through today, and you've completed lesson 2. And like I said, make sure that you go on Nearpod to finish the actual lesson for lesson 2.